Hello everybody, welcome back to my creative space. This is Emma. It's lovely to have you here again. I hope you've had a peaceful week, a creative week, and I hope you're all well and fit and happy and healthy wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining me here again. It's lovely to have you here on this very auspicious day because I think this is going to be the last week of this piece that I've been making, and I'm just very excited about that. I managed to get the lighthouse, in fact both lighthouses done last week, and what a difference that made to the piece, didn't it? It kind of just began to make it look like something rather than just a random collection of bits of fabric. So today we're going to get on for the capstan, and we might get the little, I don't know what you call them, the little hawser winder things, I can't think what you call them. Bollards, I would call them bollards for want of a better word. So I'm delighted because obviously my exhibition is coming up soon with my little group, with my lovely group of fellow textile artists. So I've really got to get this thing finished. Still obviously a way to go, and I've got some other pieces to finish off. So thank you very much for joining me on this journey, and thank you very much for all your subscriptions. Thank you for your comments. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up if you enjoy the video, because that all helps to grow the channel, and then perhaps more people can join us here on this, you know, bit of fabric fun, a bit of textile art, and a bit of stitching, and just maybe a bit of relaxation. An absolutely lovely week. We've had a mixture of rain and sun. It's typical sort of spring here in the UK, and it's just lovely to see more and more things coming up in the hedgerows. I'm quite thrilled with myself because I've done something I wanted to do for a long time. I made some delicious tomato soup. I love making soup for my lunch, and I have a really big orange casserole dish that I do it in, and it's just I roast all the vegetables up, and then I just add whatever liquids I'm going to put in, tins of tomatoes or whatever. And I decided I wanted to add some nettles. I wanted to put some nettles into something for ages, and so I went round our little piece of land and I picked, because all the nettles are just beginning to come up, and I know people talk about how nutritious they are, especially in the springtime. Later in the year they're not very good, they get a bit tough and horrible. But in the springtime, they're full of all these delicious nutrients and minerals and things. So I just went round with a little bowl and a pair of scissors, and I went snip, snip, snip. And I just simply added them into my soup towards the end of cooking. And I also put a little bit of seaweed flakes in as well. So I felt I had this super powerful, delicious, tasty soup for my lunch that day. And it felt quite empowering just to go around and pick things which are for free, that grow in abundance in the springtime here, and I'm sure wherever you are in the world there will be similar plants that you can go out and pick. And the thing about nettles is they're so obvious, aren't they, that I can't go and pick the wrong thing, which is always a little bit of a concern when you're not used to sort of foraging for things. So I was really thrilled with that, and it was very tasty and delicious, as I say. I watch a lovely herbalist, and I'll leave a link down below to her channel if anybody's interested. She's called Terry, and I've just completely forgotten her surname, but Conway, is it? Anyway, she works from a lovely place in Ireland. It's worth watching her videos just for the scenery and for her dogs and for her garden, because her garden's quite wild. It's a bit like how we are here. It's kind of a small holding with chickens and just wildness and trying to tame the wildness. But she's a wonderful herbalist, and I really enjoy watching her videos because she's full of homespun wisdom, really. She's quite forthright in her views, but I like that. She's very direct, and she tells you exactly what to do and how to do it. And it's not that I particularly want to use herbs as such and make all the tinctures and things, but I just like to learn more about the things you can pick yourself and put into your own diet that will make you feel strong and healthy and give you vitality. And I think nettles are just the most wonderful plant. They give us so much, and we just kind of think they're just this terrible weed and things that we don't want in the garden. And I appreciate they're not for everybody in your beautiful garden. They might not be what you want, but they do add wildness, and they bring in wildlife. You know, they're good for all sorts of reasons. So I was pleased with myself. I really enjoyed making my soup. So today we're going to get on with this piece. As I say, we've got the lighthouses on, and this week I'm going to get on with the capstan. Got to get this thing moving, got some work to finish off, got to get a shift on today. So I'm going to take you over in a moment, but first of all I'm just going to say I won't be here for a couple of weeks now. Actually, I didn't plan this, but it's worked out beautifully time-wise. So I will see you again in about 3 weeks' time, and I'll leave you the date to that when I get to the end of the video, because I can't think what the date is right now. And in the meantime, we're going to go and get on with this piece and see where it's going to take us today. Okay, so what I've done is I've cut myself out the capstan shape in some black felt. And I didn't have quite enough to cut it in one piece, so I've cut it in two. And I confess I actually did use the tracing for this because I was trying to cut it roughly to the shape, but there's so much, it's quite a complex little piece, it's quite funny. That was the lighthouse and the tower were really simple to do, but this has got so many different things going on. It's got bits of wood, it's got bits of metal, it's got sort of circles down here and spokes and I don't know, all sorts going on. So what I've done is I've just cut it out in black felt because I thought that'll give it a bit of wadding effect, and I've cut some bits of brown out that I'm just going to kind of scop on top of there. So I've cut the black slightly thinner than it needs to be, and we'll just see how this goes. And I might have to patch it up a little bit more. And then there's this bit down here which seems to be, we think it's a bit of wood, as though there was wood around the capstan, so there was this rusty metal bit and then there's this wood bit, which is probably where the hawser would have got kind of wrapped round again and again. So it's all a bit lopsided, but hopefully it'll come good. I've also got some of this fabric which I'm quite keen to add into the mix because I think it helps sort of break it up somehow. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I'm just thinking about how it's going to go and then just do the stitching on top. So I'm messing around with it. It's early stages. It's quite fun to do. It's like the last tricky thing to do, I think, and I'm quite appreciating how it's going to come together if I just play with it. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see over here, I've kind of done these little, I think they're bollards, I don't know what you call them, the way you wrap the ropes round, and I really like those. I think they're quite fine. I've got two different colours of fabric, and I've got some of this really lovely, and let's just see. So I've got this orangey, it's a shirt fabric I think, and then I've got this gorgeous lovely lacy netty stuff. I can just try and show you it. It's lovely. So on that side it is quite shiny and obvious, but if you turn it over you get this really nice sort of indented effect as though it's quite rusty. So I'm just adding that on in little bits. So they'll be nice and easy to do. And I'm not quite sure whether I want to add any of this rusty stuff onto here as well. I'm not quite sure because it's obviously quite red, but it is a rusty piece. It has got rustiness to this, so I'm quite enjoying playing around with it and making little bits, because it's not perfect, it's rusty and it's old and it's trying to capture that, and that's quite exciting. So, and then we'll put some stitching on top and it'll all begin to make sense, and hopefully then we'll be just about done. I want to do a little bit more work on, I'll just show you up here, I'm going to do a little bit more work on here. I felt as though this was just too pristine, it was too clean, so I'm going to add some muslin onto it and a bit more stitching. I just felt it was too clinical, if you like, because it was so smooth, and because I'd actually ironed the fabric, it was rather clinical looking, so I'm just going to add those bits on. It's a work in progress, this, but we're getting there, and I'm pleased. It's beginning to come together. I can see the end is in sight, and I'm really pleased with what's come out. It's exciting. So the important thing here is I've kind of got a rough shape cut out now, and I've layered things up. So the black underneath is now, I've cut that away so that you can see the little holes where the rods would have gone in to turn the capstan round. I've put more fabric on there, and I'll just do some stitching to create the shape, and then I'll cut it back. So this is the basic shape, and then I'm just going to add on what I think goes with it. So it's nice. I kind of feel like I've got the basic shape, and then I'll just play around with it. And it doesn't matter what happens now. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. That's not the name of the game, but I'm just trying to make it look, you know, as realistic as I can. Get a feeling for it. Stepping back from it needing to be perfect, and just getting the feeling of it and getting the gist. And I will enjoy, I'm sure, doing the stitching down here to get the sort of, it's like the effects of rungs going around somehow, the metal work. So more playtime. So I'm sitting here with lots of bits of fabric, lovely luscious bits of fabric, and I'm trying to create something quite rustic looking. It's a very metallic, rusty old metal thing, this capstan, It's a very particular shape, so I have to confess, for this particular thing, I am actually using a shape guide, which is the pattern pieces that I've cut out, just to give me a shape guide. I may well not use them, but it's just giving me some idea of how big the material is that I need to have, because I'm a bit adrift, and I feel as though I've worked so hard on everything else. This is just making it easier, just to have a bit of a guide. And as I say, I may well cut it by eye eventually, I don't know. What I'm doing, I'll show you close up, I'll turn the camera down and I'll show you what I'm actually doing with all these little bits of fabric. So this is what I've got going on here. What I've done is I've cut out the shapes roughly. I've actually pinned them onto a piece of felt, partly so that I can actually move it around, and partly I haven't quite decided how many layers I want to create this sense of a, it's kind of a 3D piece, isn't it? But it's being done in a 2D way. And it's such an iconic thing, this capstan. And I wanted to try and capture the roughness of it, the rustiness of it. And so I've been playing around. So to start with, I just pinned these shapes on. I believe this is a piece of wood that's just incredibly weathered, that was probably wrapped round. It was probably originally possibly a whole wooden thing that the hawsers, the big metal hawsers, would just be wrapped round as you turn the capstan round with these things which get inserted. You put big rods in and everybody helps turn it. It's very exciting really. It's quite an interesting piece to work on. So I've got these fabrics and I was just playing around with the idea of introducing sort of layers of rustiness to it. So what I've done is I've cut myself a little sample here, and what I've done is I've actually embellished some of these fabrics on. I just snipped them up and embellished them, and I think that works quite well. If I show you, where's my little piece gone? I had another little piece a minute ago, just a sec. Where have I put it? As usual, I'm just kind of feeling my way, and by starting it, it starts to develop and show me which way to go. It's really helpful. In fact, I was kind of apprehensive about doing this bit because, as I say, it's such an iconic bit, and it's so different because it's just rusty metal, you know. What else are you going to do with it? But I discovered if you sort of embellish some of these fabrics onto the background, I've got this brown fabric here that I'm using as the background. It's actually very shiny on the other side when I've turned it over. Oh, there you go. You can see what effect the embellisher has on the other side. And I just thought you can actually cut holes out of it, and then you get the holes where they would have put the rods to turn the capstan round. So I've done a little bit here, and all I've done is I cut a bigger piece of the brown, embellished some little snippets onto it, and that's kind of given me, then I've cut it out roughly to the shape, and I think that works. I think that's giving me a nice texture, and then I can add some stitching onto that. It's obviously in great contrast with the, I'll just tilt you up a second. It's in great contrast with the lighthouse, because the lighthouse is so kind of pristine and white. These two lighthouses. This is such a rusty old piece of kit, honestly, but it's beautiful. It's got its own absolute beauty, and I love it. So I really want to try and honour that, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm playing around, and I'll play around some more, and then I'll be able to decide whether I think I'm going to stitch the whole thing in place rather than, I don't really want to stitch it separate and then add it on. I kind of feel as though it needs to be put down. I'll work out exactly where it's going, and then we'll just go for it and hit it with some stitching, and then it'll be done. That'll be it, and it'll be good enough. So I'm just going to cut out a little squarish bit here for the bit where you would have put the capstan rods in. There you go, and if I just pull this down a little bit, you'll be able to see, and then by the time I've stitched that in place, you know, that little black thing will hopefully look like it's a hole rather than something on top of this piece of fabric. So here's my top bit. I've just cut it out by eye roughly to go on the top of here. It needs to be bigger, and it needs to stick out a bit over the top. And I've also cut myself a little tiny knobby bit. It's got this like kind of knobby bit there, and I like that. That is beginning to give it a bit of reality, isn't it? It's kind of making it look a bit more real. And depending on how I manage to stitch it down as to how well it goes together, but I'm enjoying doing this. I'm enjoying playing with it, and you can see the difference, can't you? With the fact that I've embellished it, just knocks this back but we're creating this textured surface, but it's using these colours. And this fabric is brilliant because you can cut any bits out that you want, whether you want dark bits or light bits. It's got brown bits, it's got white bits, and that's so useful. And if you just chop it up into little pieces and apply it down, and then a little bit of this sort of rusty looking stuff as well. So I'm just playing around here with exactly how I'm going to do this, and I'm not 100% sure exactly what I'm going to use as sort of layering and wadding and stuff, but I'll show you what I've made so far. Is all of these little pieces. It's like pieces of a jigsaw, and I'm super excited. I've put iron-on black filing on this back side, which is great because it's taken these very soft floppy things and turned them into something much more manageable, and I can piece it together now, you see. I'm not quite sure exactly what is going where, but I'm just playing around with possibilities here. I've done a little bit of circular stitching there just to try and capture that little bit of metal work, and I've obviously got to do some more stitching as I get it down. I've created this sort of outer ring which is going to get put on here somehow. Again, it's all about the layers and how it's going to look, so I've got to play around with that a little bit. I think that's too much, but I'd rather make it a bit bigger than a bit smaller, and I've got some stitching to do which will help kind of pull it together, but I think it's beginning to work. So we'll put this on here. I'm very pleased with this bit. I think this bit works pretty well, and it's made it much more real, I think, doing this layering process, doing the embellishing, and then I'm going to add stitching. Obviously I've got to cut away the background here. I've got to cut that all to shape, but I just wanted to show you where it's come to and how nicely that's come together. It's again going to look different once I stitch it, and I just have to accept that that is going to be the case. But I'm excited to have got it to this point. It's been a case of just kicking my butt and going, no, come on, you've got to get this thing done. It needs done. You've got an exhibition. Get it moving. Stop faffing about and get it going. So I'm going to play around with this bit and get it sort of pinned on, get it stitched on, and then we'll have another look at it. Okay, so I'm going to show you where I've got to, okay? I'm going to try and unfold this so you can kind of get the feeling of what we've got going on here. So we've got the sky. I'll just try and pull this down a little bit. Okay, so we've now got two lighthouses, oops, and a long piece of red thread, and we've got some little, I don't know what you call these, they're not capstans, what do you call them, bollard things, where you would wrap the ropes round, a little area where there's a sort of a gap in the stonework. I've got a little bit of stitching to do here to try and just make that fit better. I've added some rougher pieces of fabric to the lighthouse because I felt it was just too kind of pristine. It was kind of just, I'm just going to cut this thread off so it's just annoying me. I kind of wanted it to feel like it wasn't so brand new, because it's not. It's an old lighthouse, and so I've added this muslin to it just very simply, just to give it a little bit of feeling of age, and I've put some little struts on here, just that helped sort of break up that area a bit. And then we'll come down here and just move that up a little bit. Ow, ooh, just prodded myself. So, and here's my capstan all done and dusted. I had such a lot of fun working on this. As you saw, I've layered it up, I've added stitching, I've managed to make that get a bit more of an indent to it by stitching through the little holes but leaving the top fabric sticking up. So it's been an absolute labour of love, but I'm quite pleased with it. It's a very odd landscape, really. It's a bit of, there's a sort of a surreal quality to it. I feel as though it's these objects that are just placed on this very hard landscape, and with the sky and everything, it's just kind of really fascinating to me. So what I've got to do next is I want to get all my edges turned in. I might have to do a little bit more stitching on these bits, as I say, but to all intents and purposes it's done. I'll show you the back. Look, there's some of the stitching on the back, which is always interesting to see. There you go, look, that's what it looks like. It's all quite messy. But what I love is when you get a piece of textile art, it's a thing, isn't it? It's a thing in its own right. It's like when you make quilts. It's got that same quality, this piece particularly. I love that it becomes a thing, and you can, it's got a, oh, I don't know, instead of being thin, wafty fabric, it's got substance now, and I love that quality to it. So I'm going to get the edges done, and at some point I will get to show you the whole thing finished. Who knows when that will be, because I really have to get myself sorted out now. This exhibition's coming up soon, so only I can do it. It's got to be me that finishes it off, all these edges to do. So I'll say cheerio for now. I will see you again very soon. It's going to be 3 weeks. It'll be the 24th of April, and I hope you'll all have a very creative time. I've got lots to do here, as you can see. And yeah, that's it for now. Bye from me. Bye. Ba ba da ba da ba da ba ba.